Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast, where we're always talking everything college hoops. Could have been anywhere else on the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus. We totally appreciate that, especially in the current times. Hope everybody is safe, healthy, calm, and strong. Stay strong out there. We're going to celebrate some of the great seasons that took place this year in college basketball, and one of those seasons has to include the Liberty Flames. We brought in Damien Sordelett, who writes for the News and Advance. He is a member of the U.S. Basketball Writers Association. Please give him a follow at Damien Sordelett, capital D for Damien, capital S for Sordelett. That's Sordelett. If you're looking for a little bit more Liberty Flame coverage, follow his work over at the News Advance. Some of the things that we talked over with Damien concerning Liberty. We looked a little into the future and looked into the crystal ball. Talked about some transfers and what help might be on the way. Totally discussed this is the best Liberty team in program history. Talked to Caleb Homesley and his NBA aspirations and what makes him an NBA player on both sides of the ball. We talked about some pack line principles and the rigors that are involved in teaching and learning those pack line principles. We talked a little bit about what might be happening next year as far as Kyle Rode, sophomore, comes back, and he is one of the underrated passers on this particular team. And we talked about the guard McGee and his athletic profile. Definitely stay tuned for that. They got a new arena on the way, and they have one of the best recruiting classes in program history. A lot to celebrate in Lynchburg, Virginia. So we just want to say thank you to Damien for joining us to talk some Liberty Flames. Again, give him a follow at Damien Sordelett over on Twitter, capital D, capital S, capital D for Damien, capital S for Sordelett. If you really like what you're listening to, give the podcast a follow over on Twitter, SDS Podcast, efficiency of keystrokes, of course. Please give Mike a follow on Twitter as well, at Randall Rant. Say some nice things about all the awesome interviews that he's been putting together and gathering for your college basketball ears. If you really enjoy what you're listening to, especially when you're missing the Final Four, maybe give the podcast a nice review on your podcast consumption vehicle of choice. Kindness is always cool. Thank you for those things in advance. Again, we hope everybody that's out there and listening, we know the commutes may not be occurring as frequently as they were in the past, but we hope that we're keeping you company on a run, a walk around the block, a workout, or maybe just washing some dishes. Wash those hands while you're at it. Cheers, everybody. Welcome back, listeners, to the Screen to Screener College Basketball Podcast, where we're always talking everything college hoops. And today, we're going to talk some Liberty Flame college hoops with Damien Sordelett. Damien writes for the News and Advance down in Lynchburg, Virginia, and covers Liberty hoops just about as well as anybody we know. Damien, thanks so much for giving the Screen to Screener College Basketball Podcast a little time here. How are things down there?
Everything's going well down here, Gus. Staying busy, even though most of us are now working from home because of COVID-19. But there's still plenty of news to report. Liberty's still in the recruiting battle to fill out the 2020 class. They have one more scholarship to fill because of a transfer. It's really interesting trying to see how they're doing this virtual recruiting now, especially with giving tours. They were able to pick up a graduate transfer in Chris Parker from Division II Henderson State. And he never visited campus, never stepped foot on campus. He did everything through FaceTime and liked what he saw. And I guess they had the tape on him to know what he could provide. So they added a point guard for that. So that definitely keeps us busy during this time when we should be gearing up for, the Final Four weekend and getting ready to, most of us, to head down to Atlanta to experience, some of the best college basketball of the season.
Yeah, I think you hit on it right there. I think we're all looking at different ways to accomplish what we thought were just commonplace things. And obviously that falls into the recruiting situation as well, at Liberty and everywhere. All right, so Damien, let's just get into this a little bit and try to encapsulate what happened for the Liberty Flames this past season. 30 wins in any college hoop season is just downright serious. That's like Gonzaga territory. Let's just start there. Gathering 30 wins prior to the start of the, national postseason opportunity is kind of insane. I guess the generic question is just how good was this Flames team this season?
To put it simply, it was the best team in program history, without a doubt. You look at the cast that they had in their rotation, starting with Caleb Homesley, was the ASUN Player of the Year. He's a 6'6", lengthy lanky guard that is going to get some NBA attention. He had a bunch of NBA scouts look at him throughout the year. He had his dynamic ability on the wing. You had Scotty James down there in the post. And then you had the reliable short point guard in Georgie Pacheco-Ortiz, who really down the stretch was everything Liberty needed in a floor general to help them get through the end of the season and then get through the 3 games in the ASUN tournament. This was a team that, if it got the right draw as a 12 or maybe even a 13 seed in the NCAA tournament, could have made it to the second weekend. And everyone remembers last year beating Mississippi State in the first round and giving Virginia Tech a really good game in the second round. But this team, I felt, had the opportunity and probably had the pieces together to get to the second weekend, which had never been done in the men's program history. The women's team back in the 90s made it to the Sweet 16. They had a bunch of tall post players, I think like a trio of 6'5", 6'6" girls that, was difficult for anyone to match up with. And they were able to take advantage of that and get to the Sweet 16. But this Liberty team had the opportunity this year of doing that. And it's a shame we didn't get a chance to see if that could come to fruition.
I think that's kind of like the theme of every single one of our like season recap series podcasts here. It's just like we always just wanted to see the opportunity exist for some of these great programs that only have like a year's shelf life and maybe just missed out on that one singular opportunity. I mean, Dayton comes to mind as well. Let's speak a little bit on Caleb Homesley. He's the guy. Every team that was going to make a run this March needs a dude, needs a stud. He was that guy. He's open right now while people are washing their hands. The fact that he was willing to and had the green light from just about anywhere on the floor as soon as he crossed half court. The box score numbers will look on Homesley with kind eyes, but I think the advanced metrics really reveal some of his true value, especially inside a program like yours at Liberty. He led the ASUN in effective field goal percentage. He held the best defensive box plus minus number in the ASUN as well. Try to explain to the listeners just how good Homesley is. You mentioned he's going to get some NBA looks. I totally am on board with you and agree with you there. Just how good is he on both sides of the ball, Dave?
His offensive numbers were there when he first stepped foot on the campus. The biggest growth for him over the 5 years was his defense. He became a very good defender. And there were a lot of times, because Liberty plays with 4 guards and he's usually that 4th guard, he has to match up against maybe a combo post player, wing player. So he had to adapt throughout the years of being able to step out, guard a guy from beyond the arc, and also be able to defend on the block. And when he had his second major knee injury, which came during his sophomore season, where he blew out his ACL and his MCL in his left knee, he went through the process of bulking up as well. So while he was rehabbing and getting his lower body stronger, he was bulking up in his upper body. And you saw a noticeable transformation of sophomore season to his redshirt sophomore season. And I think his progression that he took from his freshman to his sophomore year, it didn't take a back seat to his recovery. He got consistently better. And I think he found the work ethic throughout the years of he's going to have to work very hard at this. He was naturally gifted and was better than most anyone he stepped on the court with when he was in high school, but he had to find the work ethic and make sure he could keep making gradual gains every year. And I think he saw that. And there was a big jump in him. We saw last year in that 30-point game against Mississippi State in the NCAA tournament to this year. He had that look there late in the year where he was in March mode. He was ready to take control. And defensively, like you mentioned, no one really would guess that he had the best defensive plus minus in the conference. Everyone might have thought it would have been Elijah Cuffey, who was the best perimeter defender on Liberty, or maybe even Wasu down at North Florida. The fact that Homesley had it showed just how much he improved defensively. And it's either with his help defense on block shots or the fact that he became a much better one-on-one defender in the pack line defense. And I think that was something that is going to garner a lot of interest at the next level, is the fact that not only was his shooting percentage and what he was able to do on the offensive end kept getting better, but the fact that defensively he improved tremendously during his time at Liberty.
And if you look at what the NBA currently values, it's a diverse wings that can guard multiple positions, just like you mentioned Homesley can do, and you outlined that perfectly. And also shot makers on the wing. And, we saw multiple examples of him making not just a college three-pointer, but a well beyond NBA range three-pointer. And he had that freedom on the offensive end. He was definitely the type of player that can win a game or 2 or 3 in March. And just to take a little dig at my co-host, Mike Randall here, Damien, last season, my co-host picked Mississippi State to reach the Final Four out of that bracket. So as soon as your team took his team down, he ripped up his bracket and started over. And I'm glad you mentioned that particular game. Every star needs a sidekick or a co-star. And I think calling Scotty James that might be a little silly or a little bit of an insult, because a senior post player, led your conference in PER last 3 seasons, and he exits his career with a PER number that's over 31 for his career, which is like sky high, top 10 in the nation. Do the listeners a favor. Try to attempt to explain the value of James, what he does on both sides of the floor for the pack line defense, but also for the offense that opens up those shots for players like Homesley.
Yeah, I'll start on the offensive end because that's probably the easiest spot to start off with. And James shot about 60% from the floor for his career at Liberty. And last season, so the 2018-19 season when Liberty made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament, he shot about 64% from the field, which was an astronomical number. And this year it dipped down to 61%, which is still nothing to sneeze at. He finishes very strong around the rim. If you had a chance to watch the ASUN title game against Lipscomb, he got out and ran, and he is at 6'7", 6'8", 240 pounds. He runs very well, and he's able to finish a lot of transitions with dunks, and he's very good at handling the ball in the post, very good at seeing help defense come over, and he does a very good job of, making sure his teammates get involved. Defensively, he's very hard to move with his size, and he does a very good job of contesting shots. Not really a rim protector in the sense of he's going to get a lot of block shots, but he's going to make defenders have to shoot over him and around him. And those contests really helped Liberty because as he learned the pack line defense, he knew when he needed to help, and he knew when he needed to stay with his man and make sure his man didn't get an easy shot. And his ability to contest and make sure those teams weren't able to get easy looks around the rim was key to Liberty's ability to be good on the defensive end, particularly these last 2 years.
You mentioned the principles of the pack line defense. Those things don't get learned and aren't taught just over one season. It's a long process. And so part of that process is with these two seniors that have, a team that has NCAA experience, a team profile that scares any high major team anywhere. Damien, 2-part question here. First, this Liberty team would scare the pants off of any 4, 5, or 6 seed, right? And then do me a favor, explain to the listeners just what type of pack line defense principles Coach McKay has installed and why it might give others nightmares, especially after what we saw with the whole darn thing last year with UVA winning the whole entire thing with the similar principles and similar profile.
Yeah, they would frighten any 5 or 6 seed, maybe even a 4 seed if Liberty had gone down to a 13 seed. And we'll go to the pack line defense. And Richie McKay is in his second stint at Liberty, and he was there for 2 years and then became Tony Bennett's associate head coach at UVA. He was there for 6 years, and he was there during the building process of the pack line defense in order to establish those principles of making sure you're not reverting back to old habits of always making the risky play of going after a pass or trying to get too far out and defending a player outside the 3-point line. They went through a lot of growing pains with that. He is liking the building process, what he's done at Liberty, to what he did at UVA with Tony Bennett. And it took the Cavaliers a few years to kind of get through the rigors of understanding that defense. And then that's when we started seeing this team become consistently one of the better teams in the ACC and conversely one of the better teams in the country. But we saw that at Liberty. I mean, they had some rough stretches. In his first year, they, I believe, lost 12, 13 consecutive games against Division I opponents. There was a lot of uncertainty of, will these guys learn this pack line defense? How long is it going to take? But by year 2, they had reached the 20-win threshold, and it had been quite some time since they had gotten to 20 wins. I think 2010, 2011, around that time is when the last time they reached that 20-win threshold. You started seeing, the defensive numbers starting to gradually improve over time as he's been able to recruit the type of players he wants in the program. And then you get the buy-in from guys like Caleb Homesley, who's been in the system for 5 years, Mayo Baxter-Bell, who's also been in the system for 5 years. Then you get a guy like Pacheco Ortiz, who was in the system for 4 years. And then you add in guys like Scotty James, who transferred in from Bradley and was in the system for 4 years. Then you got Elijah Cuffey, who's been in the system for 3 years. And those guys, the more that you had the cohesiveness, the better that defense is produced. I think you saw the same thing with UVA. You had guys that were in the system for a long time. They saw the benefits of how that system played out, and I think you're starting to see that with Liberty. Now, Liberty's starting to attract a better student athlete who can help at the level that they're at, and that should help continue this trajectory of solid defensive play for years to come.
And we saw the exact same trajectory that you're talking about at UVA with, that group of Ty Jerome, Kyle Guy, DeAndre Hunter. And it seems like it would be a little bit easier, for lack of a better term, to have that continual teaching and learning over a 4/5 year period at a place like Liberty, whereas a place like UVA, you're going to have Ty Jerome leave. You're going to have Jerome Hunter leave to go to the NBA, where it seems like this might be a little bit more sustainable for Coach McKay. And he's really got something cooking here with Liberty. He's been rewarded with another contract extension. And you mentioned the uniqueness of this situation for the program and coach. Please attempt to tell the listeners why the second go around with the Flames has worked out so well for both your program and the coaching staff. And it's a super unique situation anywhere in the landscape of sports, but not dissimilar from our hometown Yankees with Billy Martin back in the day, where they just brought him back and recycled him over and over again. Why did both sides decide to reinvest when conventional wisdom might say otherwise and go a different direction as far as the coaching staff might go?
When Jeff Barber was the former AD at Liberty, was looking to replace Dale Layer following the 2014-15 season, he wanted to find a coach who understood the Liberty landscape, understood the university's mission, and knew the type of athlete you need to attract at Liberty is one that fits the university's mission. And Richie McKay had been there for 2 years. He understood that. And then when he was going through the interview process, McKay said, I got my PhD in defense. And that's something that Liberty did lack a bit during his first tenure there, is they didn't really play a lot of defense. You had the offensive numbers, and they had some guys who could put the ball in the basket. And I think Seth Curry is the first one that comes to mind. Kyle Oman's another one. Jesse Sanders is another one as well. The fact that he was able to bring a defensive mentality, and I think at that time when he did come back, you could see, right up the road in Charlottesville, UVA was putting together some really good years with that defense. And bringing back McKay, like I mentioned before, understood the landscape of Liberty, understood what is expected of a student athlete there, and understands what it means to be an ambassador to the university, being the men's basketball coach. It just worked out. He's really enjoyed the second go around, because he didn't bring the aspirations of we're going to deliver results immediately. He said we're going to build this program the right way. We're going to have sustained success, not just a moderate success here, a run here, and then lulls. He wanted to make sure that this program was built the right way, and built so that way this university, whichever conference is in, Big South when he returned and now in the ASUN, they can have sustained success. And we've seen over the last 4 years, we've seen that sustained success. And, they've been recruiting the right way, and, they have a really good recruiting class coming in this year, and they've already added 2 really good verbal recruits for the class of 2021. So they're really building for a sustained success here in the ASUN conference.
Well, it seems like, if you're going to bust out on 30 wins and be one of the teams that high majors are going to be scared to play because of your defensive profile and your team and culture characteristics, that makes perfect sense. And it seems like maybe more programs and more coaches could look at a second chance, a second go around, and maybe say, this could really benefit it. And example A is obviously what you're talking about right here with Liberty and Flames. You mentioned Seth Curry, before he transferred to Duke and went on to the NBA. He was at Liberty. Maybe talk a little bit about Kyle Rode, the 6'7" freshman who Coach McKay gave almost 20 minutes a game to this season. Do you think he can fill some of those minutes and some of that production that we talked about with James and Homesley that might be lost for the next 3 seasons for the Flames?
I think so. And McKay, even this year, said he thinks Kyle Rode has the opportunity to be one of the greatest to put on a Liberty uniform when it's all said and done. Oh. He's a really talented 6'7" freshman from Lexington, Kentucky, was the city's all-time leading scorer when he graduated from there. And you think of, Lexington, Kentucky, that has been some of the most fertile recruiting territory for high major programs, mid-majors throughout the years. He's got that it factor. McKay has also referred to him like the team's version of Tim Tebow, an emotional leader. Even as a freshman, he had that it factor of leading the team. I think you'll see him really shine as a sophomore. He had some really good games early in his freshman year. He was the MVP of the Bahamas, the Showcase of the Bahamas tournament that they 3-0 in. And then as the season wore on, it was kind of like that second guy off the bench, didn't log as many points. He was really consistent with his play, especially on the defensive end, and I think that's something that's going to help. I think he's going to be the guy who fills in a lot for that production that Caleb Homesley had. He's more of a wing guy, can shoot the three, and is really a good passer, a really underrated passer for his size. So I think he has the ability to really fill in there at whether it be, shooting guard, whether it be small forward, power forward. He has that versatility that Homesley had where he can play and guard at both positions.
It seems like we talked about the sustained success of a program, and it seems like Rode is going to be one of those student athletes that fills that void that is left by some of the seniors that we mentioned with Homesley and James, and he's just going to step right in. And you mentioned his buy-in on the defensive end. That's the way to find the floor and find more minutes in a program like Liberty. If you're going to buy in on the defensive end and really lock into those pack line principles, you'll be on the floor a ton. I guess the follow-up question is, can we expect a similar jump from guard Darius McGee, who put up almost 10 points a game for you guys as a sophomore this past season? Do you think he's going to be one of those explode on the nation type players, but do you think he's one of those players that can make a nice jump during his junior year?
Oh, absolutely. And he got more minutes as a sophomore because he did start every game. And he's, for a guy who's 5'9" with a 49-inch vertical.
Right. I was hoping you'd bring that up.
He's dynamic in the open court. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is he has a green light whenever they cross midcourt. He can shoot it from wherever. Okay. Like he's probably a guy who could probably shoot about 40% from 3-point range. He's very streaky, and he's also, like I mentioned with that vertical, he can finish around the basket, especially in traffic. I think he's a guy you're going to see his scoring go up a little bit. He might be a guy who averages 12, 13 points a game. And also another thing is he shoots a good free throw. He's 90% from the free throw line. If he gets more opportunities to attack the rim, he's going to get more chances at the free throw line, and that's where he's going to hurt a lot of teams. And that's probably going to be where he's going to make some living, especially late in the game, because Liberty now with Pacheco Ortiz graduating needs that guy to shoot free throws at the end of games. And I think McGee's going to be a guy who, they're going to put the ball in his hands late in games and let him shoot free throws because they know he's virtually automatic from the line late in games. So he's a guy who I think can, be one of the top players in the ASUN Conference.
I don't doubt you there. Again, we one of the things we've always said, around this time is guards win in March. And if you have a guard that can make their free throws and get some penetration, create opportunities for others, like it sounds like McGee can with his athletic ability and the shooting prowess and that green light across half court. I kind of like that. That sounds like he's going to fill that role perfectly. And especially in a program and in a system that values possessions and values the ball, I would imagine and envision McGee being really successful next season. So with a winning culture in place, a familiar leader on the sidelines, locked up for a few seasons here, the history of talented players finding their way to Lynchburg. We mentioned Seth Curry, among others. What can the nation expect from Liberty next season? Look into that crystal ball a little bit, Damien, with the efficient shooting numbers coupled with the lockdown pack defense. And is that going to equate to success for the Flames that's not dissimilar from maybe San Diego State, maybe a Belmont, or maybe even a Gonzaga?
Yeah, that's where Liberty was building toward. I think what Liberty's going to have its back pocket is the brand new Liberty Arena that's going to be finished for the season. It's a $65 million palace that they're building right next to the Vine Center, and it's going to be the home for Liberty basketball. It's going to have all the bells and whistles that you want, and that's going to be a big recruiting tool for Liberty moving forward. We've touched on this with the recruiting. You're bringing in the highest rated recruit in program history in Isaiah Warfield, or even rated higher than Kyle Rode. He's a guy who's going to be a lockdown perimeter defender and a guy that you're probably going to want the ball in his hands late in the game because of his shorter decision making. Then you add in pieces like Drake Dobbs, Jonathan Jackson. If that name sounds familiar, he's the younger brother of Justin Jackson, who was the ACC Player of the Year at UNC and is currently playing in the NBA. And they are adding some post-step this week with this season with Micaiah B coming in. He's going to probably similar to Scotty James in the back to the basket mentality. So they're building. They have the pieces in place to really be a successful program moving forward. And when you look at how he's done, what McKay's done recruiting, you mentioned the other programs like San Diego State, Belmont, even with, Casey Alexander coming in, Mark Few and Gonzaga. What they've been able to do is they've strung together some really good recruiting classes. So that way there's no drop off. And you see with a lot of these programs in the mid-major level, they have like a good year. And then all of a sudden, because the recruiting hasn't gone well, drop off. I think what McKay has done at Liberty Liberty is he wants to build the sustained success through the recruiting. And I think Liberty has a unique position as an evangelical Christian university where they can attract the type of student athlete that sees what Liberty has to offer and is also a really good student athlete. And he can attract the type of players who won't get in trouble, who'll do the right thing, and they will buy into what they want to do with the program. And I think that's something that Liberty can become the East Coast version of Gonzaga. And that's something that, they can look forward to in the future.
Listen, if we're having that conversation about Liberty for the next couple of seasons and the job that Coach McKay and the coaching staff is putting together there as far as culture-wise and team characteristics, that's a very complimentary conversation, and I'm glad that we're having it here for the listeners. All right, Damien, let's get you out of here on 3 quickies. 3 T's. Help the listeners out. Best craft beer or brewery that's close to Lynchburg, Virginia.
Devil's Backbone up in Nelson County.
Devil's Backbone. Okay. Trust. Who's one player in the nation from this past season who you saw maybe live or maybe, just viewing games that you would trust with a last-second possession with the game on the line?
I don't want to sound like a homer, but Giorgio Pacheco-Ortiz from Liberty is a guy, 93% free throw shooter. I think he was 3rd or 4th in the nation. You look back at his career, he had that big 3-pointer against Lipscomb in last season's ASUN title game that gave Liberty a 4-point lead with less than 20 seconds to go. And he had a similar possession against NJIT in the quarterfinal round where he waited for the shot clock to go down and then converted at the rim as the shot clock was expiring to give Liberty a little bit of breathing room. Got point guard from Ponce, Puerto Rico, who played extremely well, even with all the things going on in his home country. He's a guy who I'd want the ball in his hands with the game on the line.
That's kind of one of the best answers that we've had for that question. And the fact that you bring up his perhaps family static that he has to deal with endgame shot or possession is probably not a big worry in his brain. And then Tunes, what have you been listening to while you're longing for the return of sports? Do you have any podcasts or music recommendations?
I've been listening to Led Zeppelin quite a bit over the last few weeks. 4 has been my favorite album of theirs, but 2 I've had a chance to go through and listen to a little bit more of recently. And I'm like, gosh, this is such a good album. So I've been catching up on a lot of Led Zeppelin past few weeks. Also been catching up on a lot of shows, catched up with Bosch on Amazon Prime. And that's been kind of one of my favorite shows to binge recently. It's not the typical police procedural drama. So it's been a nice show for me to watch and catch up on while we're kind of sheltering at home or staying at home during these times.
Yeah, we're all waiting it out, and there's nothing wrong with digging in the crates a little bit with some Led Zeppelin if you're going to wait it out. Damien, huge thank you for jumping on the Screen to Screener College Basketball Podcast. Please stay safe, healthy, and strong down there. Maybe we can catch up during the preseason again.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers. Cilantro. Grazie, everybody. Stay safe.